Welcome to today's live. We are going to discuss separating your identity from a failed business. If you are listening on the podcast, this is a Substack live, so you may hear any type of distractions, interactions, anything like that. So just full transparency there. But today, we're going to really get into separating your identity from a failed business. What does that mean? What does that look like? And how can we trust ourselves again when we have this, in business specifically, when we have this perception of the business failed and the ego starts like playing all of its tricks and stuff like that? So, we're going to get into that today. The first thing is businesses, we have to break down what feels like failure, why it feels like failure, and what we did back then, the initial time, to be able to move forward in this time in the present moment, right? Because what happens is when we go to restart a business, once you're told you're an entrepreneur through spirit, like you can't deny that. There's no going back. Like that is just who you are. That is what is meant to be. So what happens is I talked 2 days ago on identity loops. We get stuck in these loops sometimes. And in these loops, we will be like, okay, I meant to have this business. I'm going to start this business. And then something happens. Something happens that makes us believe that we're not cut out for it, that it's not meant for us. And we revert back to corporate, to whatever we were doing before, right? So first we have to acknowledge that a loop exists. First, we have to acknowledge that we are 1 foot in, that you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out, right? That needs to be acknowledged first. Once we acknowledge that, then we need to define what does failing actually look like and what was the reasoning behind it. So I'm going to give you an example. In 2020 is when I first launched my coaching business. And in 2021, I was starting to see movement on it. And what I mean by that is I was actually starting to make around 4 figures a month, right? I had like my first 4 figure month, and I'm not exaggerating. And this is why I do what I do now. I hit that 4 figure month and I talked myself out of business. I said, it's not meant for me. Because at that point, the perception that I had in business was I had already been trying for over a year. I hadn't seen these results that I saw plastered all over social media. So I was in the comparing game and I was, quote, out of money. I used to really believe that I would run out of money. And in my mind, I was out of money at this time. And so I had my first 4 figure month and I dipped. I went back to corporate. And I called that a failed business. I was like, that business failed. I'm not meant for it. I'm not cut out for it. And I remember I was doing business on Facebook and I removed 90% of people who are business connections. I reverted my profile back to just memes and things like that. And take this jacket off, actually. I reverted my profile back to memes and different things like that. And I was like, this is not it. So when I came back to business, the biggest thing that I had to really work through was the identity piece. It was the intuitive piece. When I was coming back to business, I had to learn how to, for one, understand what actually happened back then. It wasn't that the business failed because I quit. I did not trust myself to move it forward. Things were finally starting to see progress, and I didn't trust myself to keep that going. I didn't trust myself to be able to maintain the consistency to grow it. And so because of that, I left. And I see that happen. If you are one of those people that's in like the start stop loop of I'm going to have a business, I'm not going to have a business, I'm going to have a business, I'm not going to have a business, then more than likely, it's not even more than likely, I can tell you from experience, it's a lack of self-trust. You don't trust yourself to be able to duplicate the process that was successful. You don't trust yourself to be able to continue energetically doing what you're doing to move it forward. You don't trust yourself to sustain what it is and scale it. And so when we don't have this sense of trust within us, then we quit. And what happens when we quit is we reinforce the belief that we have that, oh, I'm not cut out for it. It's not for me. I'm not meant to have this business, right? And so we reinforce that belief. But then if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, send me a DM if this happened to you. Just be like, yes, I relate. Send it to me on Substack at Nikki Lynn Mayo. But anywho, if this has happened to you and then you go back to your corporate job or a corporate job hoping for something else, if you're happy there, great. But if you go back and you're hoping for something else, it's only a matter of time before you consider starting a business again. It's only a matter of time before you're like, actually, I'm meant to have this business. I'm supposed to run a business. I'm supposed to do XYZ with my life. That comes down to entrepreneurship, right? But then we get in a shame loop. I was in the shame loop. When I say I quit in 2021, I took years off my business. Years. Okay. I would dabble into things here and there between 2021 and when I officially like relaunched in 2025. I would dabble into different things. I started with the Amazon influencer program. I learned how, a little bit about digital products. I learned how to do Amazon KDP, right? I dabbled into other things that I'm still a part of and I'm grateful for them. But at the core, at the root, I'm meant to be an entrepreneur. I'm meant to have a coaching and consulting business. I am meant to teach people through course creation. That has been established. I established that several years ago. But when you establish something and then to believe it is two different things. So I established it, I knew it, and I've got old Facebook posts to prove it, but I didn't believe it. I didn't trust myself with that guidance that I was receiving intuitively. So back to what I was saying about the loop, if you go back to corporate, and this is where you can DM me, you feel the pull to get back into business. Or you end up miserable, the same type of misery that you had forgotten about. Because that's what happened to me. I went back to corporate. I had a 6-figure role. And, on paper, everything looked great. On paper, people would say, you're more successful here than you were in business on paper. But internally, that was not the truth. Internally, I hated everything. And so this is the part where when you don't trust yourself and you come back into business, now you get into a space where you are thinking about what everybody else has told you. You've got the belief now inside of your own brain of, am I cut out for this? Is this for me? Am I meant to be an entrepreneur? You have all of these things. You start to think, what will people think? You may ask yourself, like, oh my gosh, these people who saw me quit and come back, like, what are they going to think? Here's a full disclaimer, newsflash. Nobody's going to think anything. And if they do, like, who cares? But nobody's going to think anything. Nobody's going to be like, oh my God, and if they do, you shouldn't even know. Like, if people are thinking something like that, like, oh, did you see her? Like, she's trying this again and blah, blah, blah. Like, those are not even people that you need to be associating with. Those are not even people that should be in your circle. So people are saying that, like, you're in the wrong circle to begin with, right? And so, but these are the things that keep us stuck. My phone is twisting. These are the things that keep us stuck. When we come back, we have all of these fears come up. And what ends up happening is the ego's job is to reinforce beliefs. I say this all the time. The ego's job is to reinforce beliefs. And so if we have not restructured, retrained our belief system to truly look at what we're doing as our life's work, as what we're meant to be doing here, as, as playing the long game, then it's going to be easier to fall into the beliefs that are not of service to your entrepreneurial journey. It's going to be easier to fall into the beliefs of, oh, I don't think I'm cut out for this because remember what happened last time? Like, yeah, I don't even want to try. I don't even want to try again, right? It's going to be easier to fall into those beliefs. But see, when I see people, and I've seen people, when I see people go through this loop, and I've been there, when I see people go through this loop, it's not that they're not cut out for entrepreneurship. They have a belief issue. They have a self-trust issue. They have a self-concept issue. They haven't figured out how to move past it. They haven't figured out how to release the old business trauma beliefs, if you will. They haven't figured that out. And to figure that out, you really have to sit and reflect, not too long. Don't spend a whole day on this, but you have to sit and reflect on what is true and what you made up in your mind. So for the longest time, I just said, I'm not really meant to have that kind of business. I knew I was meant to have some business, but I was like, I'm not really meant to have that kind of business. And so in saying that I'm not really meant to have that kind of business, well, that's the loop and the belief that I was playing in my head for the next 3 to 4 years. But in playing that loop, The proof that I was meant to have a form of business was always there because I never stopped dabbling into other pieces of entrepreneurship. I just stopped that one, which ironically was starting to be the most successful. It wasn't until I had to get honest with myself, and I say this to you because you probably have to get honest with yourself. It wasn't until I got honest with myself and really thought about what happened and really learned about my own self sabotaging patterns that I was able to be like, actually, that business did not fail. I gave up too soon. And I gave up too soon because that is my self sabotage. My self sabotage is quitting right before the breakthrough. Not anymore. It used to be. It used to be quitting right before the breakthrough. It used to be procrastination. It used to be looking to others for, like, well, what should I do? What should I do? Right? All of these things. And that is not how an entrepreneur identity should run. That is not the identity that you want to have as you come back and relaunch your business. You have to upgrade your identity. And when you upgrade your identity and you look at it at face value, then your ego can reinforce these new beliefs. So once I looked at it at face value and realized, actually, my beliefs are the issue, not me. It's not a me issue. It's a belief system issue that I had. Well, then I had to give myself new beliefs. So then what does that look like? At that point, you start writing out your proof of what worked in your business before. Because even if the business failed, the whole thing wasn't a failure. And even if it failed from the perception of what you believe failure is, once you get honest with yourself about if it actually failed or not, you will be able to see more than likely that that's not even what happened. That what ended up happening is you had a self sabotaging pattern come in. You realize you don't trust yourself. And the ego is so smart, it disguised it as something else. My ego disguised it as, well, we're out of money anyways, and we have to go back to corporate. That's what I told myself. That's exactly what I told myself. And at the same time, I was the happiest with the work that I have ever been, but I was miserable financially. And that's what put me back to corporate. Then I was relieved financially and miserable on the inside because that's not what I was supposed to be doing. That's, it's not what's a part of my mission. Okay. And so the first thing when it comes to this, for starters, you have to release any form of shame, guilt, embarrassment, any of those things when you are about to relaunch your brand, when you are coming back into business. You have to stop reliving the failure. You have to stop with the thoughts of, dang, if I would have just kept going, I would be XYZ, right? Like you can't let that come in because that time is gone. The time is gone and it's not coming back. All you have is right now. And right now you can be a brand new entrepreneur. All you have is right now. So you have to release that, okay? You have to release that shame. You have to release the idea of the time that lapsed and what could have been and all of these things. And you just have to fully understand and accept that this is the moment you have now, and every moment going forward is what you're creating right now. Okay. The second thing I have in my notes right here is extracting the data without extracting your identity. What does that even mean? So instead of looking at it from a place of, well, what does this say about me? And, oh, I'm not cut out for this and I'm so dumb and I'm not smart enough for this. All these things, right? That's not helping anybody. It's not helping you. That's not helping the clients that you're going to want to serve, right? That's not helping the profits that your business is about to make. Ask yourself what you can learn from it. Here's what I learned. I'll tell you what I learned, and that'll maybe help you figure out what you learned. I learned in that, for one, I learned a lot about identity work. I learned a lot about how I had conflicting beliefs when it came to the two identities that conflicted within me were being a mom and being an entrepreneur. I started to believe that being an entrepreneur was taking away from my children and it was making me a bad mom. That was a belief that I had. And so instead, I had to really sit with it and realize that that was not true. Right. And so that was a data piece I collected. A second data piece that I collected was what does my self-sabotage look like? My self-sabotage looks like quitting right at the breakthrough. When I was 18 years old, somebody had told me like that I had fear of success. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, I've never heard of that. That makes no sense. Because I was always so ambitious. And so I'm 18 years old. I'm ambitious. I moved to the Bay Area. I'm, at the time wanted to get into corporate. And I got in and stuff, into corporate sales. But somebody did tell me that. They were like, well, you have a fear of success. I never knew what that meant. I never knew what that meant until I was like 26. Then it clicked. And even then, it barely scratched the surface. I didn't really understand it until I was closer to 30. And I was like, okay, now I get it. That is a self sabotaging pattern that I have, is when I'm right there at the brink of pushing through to a next level, which is common. A lot of us have this. But when I'm right there about to push through to a next level, I self sabotage by telling myself it's not working and leaving. I self sabotage by being like, well, nothing's working, so I'm gonna bounce, right? And so that's what I want you to do. I want you to think about what the failed business taught you from a data standpoint, from like a little bit more of an analytical standpoint. Don't let your feelings get in there, but really look at it and say, okay, what did it teach me about myself? What is a pattern that I have? What is a self sabotaging act that I do? And you will likely see, once you can pinpoint it from the last time, you will see where it has showed up continuously over your life. And this is how you reclaim the identity. This is how you reclaim your identity after a failed business, because now you see what self sabotaging patterns that you have. So now you can reclaim the identity of the woman who just doesn't do that. It's like, it gets to just be like that. Like, okay, that's what I used to do. I'm not her anymore. Boom, new identity. I'm an entrepreneur now. New identity. And say it like you mean it. Say it like you mean it. When you talk about your business and you've relaunched and you've rebranded and you maybe you didn't rebrand, but you've relaunched and you're like, I'm going all in. I'm not quitting. Talk about it like you mean it. Talk about it like you're proud of it. Okay? Because that's another thing that I see is like, well, what do you do? Oh, well, I'm starting and trying to have this online business. But I work a 9 to 5 doing this. I see that in people. I used to be like that too. And I'm like, okay, you're not fully claiming the identity of the entrepreneur when you're wincing at the thought of being an entrepreneur and when you're not confident in telling people what you do. Now, there's more confidence there. You know what I mean? From what I do. Well, I own a consulting company and academy online that teaches people how to blend business with spirituality. I do work on identity, intuition, and business energetics, right? Like something like that. So be confident in what you do. Okay. If there is so much power in the words that you use and the energy behind the words that you use. So if you're wincing coming back into business and you're wincing at what you're doing in business, you're still holding on to old business trauma. You're still somewhere in your mind thinking, well, what if it doesn't work this time? I'm going to be embarrassed and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to give you another news flash. It will only not work if you allow it to not work. What do I mean by that? Earlier, I said, when you come back into business, look at this as your life's work, right? This is something that you are meant to do. That's why you feel the calling every single time you try to leave. And so when we look at it like our life's work and we look at it for the long game, we know that it can't fail. It's intuitively led. It exists inside of our spirit, which means it has to see its way through. Now, of course, we have free will. We can do whatever we want, but free will not without consequences, right? What would happen for those of you who are on the fence, you're listening in and you're in the middle ground and you're like, I don't know, like I do feel the pull to go back into business, but I'm nervous and blah, blah, blah. What would happen if you continued the way that you're continuing right now? How would that feel 10 years from now? Hell, how would that feel 5 years from now? For me, it got to a point where I was like, if I'm doing this again next year, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to go crazy if I am doing the things that that are not serving a purpose for me in the next year. I was going to lose my mind. When I quit my last corporate job, I was like literally in tears. I was also pregnant, but I was in tears because I was so uncomfortable there because it was not suitable for me. And I remember, and I'm telling you this because people who are not walking your shoes are not going to understand this. I remember my husband, who was my fiance at the time, he was so confused. He was like, "What's wrong? Like, why are you crying? You're making the best money you've made, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "This is miserable. This is not what I'm supposed to do. I would rather be making less money for a little bit, doing what I'm meant to do, than making this money and pretending to be happy." Right. And so I say that because People are not going to understand anyways why you're relaunching your business, why you're coming back into your business, why you're, oh, well, it didn't work last time. You'll hear that. It's not their journey, it's your journey. You have to go to sleep at night every single night and listen to your brain tell you if you are on the right track or the wrong track. You are the one who has to lay down with your thoughts in the evening and think about, did I have the day that I wanted today, or is life just going by? Am I just letting life happen and not even taking charge of playing the role in my life? But I'm just like what my last podcast episode, being performative. Are you just every single night ask yourself, like, am I performing like I'm on stage, or am I actually like the star of the show? Because if you're not the star of the show in your own life, then you're not going to be the star of the show in your own business. CEOs are not asking for permission. You have to go to sleep at night and know, you know what, today was a good day and I'm gonna make tomorrow a good day. Or analyze it. Okay, I could have done XYZ better. I could have wasted a little bit less time, scrolling or whatever. I could have reached out to more people, right? Different things like that. But my point is, these other people do not have to lay at the end of the night in your head. They don't have to think about it. They don't, if they're content in their jobs, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if they're content doing what they're doing with their life, they're content in their jobs, they're content with whatever, then let them be content. That does not mean that you also have to be content. You can go on and, like I said, and redo your business. You are the one who knows what it is you're meant to be doing. Okay. Another piece of the identity separation is not attaching to the yes and the no's behind your offers. What do I mean by that? Not attaching, if somebody says, no, thank you, I don't want your service, I don't want your product, whatever it is, you cannot attach to that. And I know as entrepreneurs, it can be a little bit more challenging because this is something that we created. This came from us and we're putting it out there. It's different than being in corporate sales and selling somebody else's product. This is a product that we created, but you have to separate your identity as a creator and as the entrepreneur from the business in the extent of not attaching to what people are saying or portraying or alluding to about your own product. Okay, you still get to be the entrepreneur and launch a bad product. That doesn't make you a bad entrepreneur. That just means that product was bad. That launch flopped. That doesn't mean you're not cut out. It just means, well, what do I need to restructure? If you think about artists, think about, musicians, famous artists, right? Musicians and things like that, especially ones who have been around for a long time. They know it's their life's work and they're putting out albums after album after album. So most of them don't always they're not always batting 100. Most of them don't always have a good album. Some of my favorite artists will drop an album that I don't like. I'm like, this is terrible. This is not my vibe at all. It doesn't make them a bad artist. It doesn't mean they need to quit. It doesn't mean like that they need to, go and start putting in applications at Kohl's. All it means is that there was a disconnect in the way I received it and what they put out, right? Or a disconnect in the way the audience received it and what they put out. It doesn't mean they have to stop. And that's separating themselves from the art, right? And sometimes what happens is things just get misinterpreted. You may have an intention behind something that you created, and then as it goes on, it gets misinterpreted by the audience, and then the audience doesn't understand it, doesn't care for it, or you're in front of the wrong people. That can also happen. You be in front of the wrong people, right? The wrong people are always going to be like, I don't know what she's doing. Okay. So separate your identity from the outcome. And I'm not saying don't be involved in your business, don't be involved in your numbers and in your revenue and all of that. That's not what I'm alluding to. But you have to separate the identity, the emotional aspect of it. You have to separate the two. You have to separate the emotions from the product when you are, especially as an entrepreneur creating your own products. I have had products flop. I have had things not sell. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't mean I need to go run and ask for my old Target job back. That's not what that means. Okay. So I'm looking at my notes, y'all. This is my favorite piece. Why starting over feels scary and why it can be in your power. So, the main reason that it feels scary is because we don't want to re feel the feelings of failing that we felt back then. We don't want to have to deal with that. We don't want to have to re-feel those feelings, right? And we also may feel like we have something to prove. We have this fear, like I mentioned earlier, what other people are going to say. And this can all be subconscious. You might consciously be like, no, Nikki, I don't care what people have to say. But your actions are going to tell a different story. So we may have these subconscious fears around that and things like that. But the thing that I love about relaunching a business after it didn't go so well the first time is one, there's more data collected. Like I said, I learned my own self sabotaging patterns and stuff. So there's a lot more data collected in how to not self sabotage, but also there's data collected in like the things that you were good at. There's data collected in, everything that you learned your first go round or your first three go rounds or whatever. Everything that you learned is not lost. I learned that I'm great with email marketing. I learned that my writing does well. I learned that I could convert just through my words without getting on sales calls, right? I learned that the first go around. And so coming back to it, those are some strengths that I know that I have. So now I can relaunch a business that aligns not like that aligns well with my strengths. I can relaunch a business that is a lot more honest and embodied and intuitive. I'll always preach on an intuitive business because I know where I gave away my power the last time. I know where the last time I tried to make things fit into places that they weren't supposed to fit. I know when the last time where I jumped from shiny object to shiny object in the idea that I was just going to get rich quick, right? I have all of that knowledge this time. And so for you, when you come back this time, there is a level of knowledge that you have that you did not have before. You can recognize your patterns, you can recognize your strengths, and you could be like, okay, this is actually when I was doing really good in business. This is what actually like was going about to what was is something that I could sustain and is something that I want to carry on. These other pieces, not so much. Right? You have all of that knowledge this time around. Not to mention, because you have the consistent pull to do it again and to not give up, it's a lot more intuitive this round. You are not going to be so hoppy. You're not going to be so jumpy. You're not going to be so, well, let me jump from here to here to here. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying you won't test things out and be like, oh, you know what? Actually, I don't like this. I like this more. I definitely did that this year. But it's going to be more purposeful. There will be a purpose to what others may consider madness, right? There'll be more of a purpose behind it. And when there's a purpose behind it and it's intuitively led, it becomes sustainable. The only way that it's not going to sustain itself is if you don't stop to catch your ego tricks. And that's what I help people with. Okay. That's what you can send me a DM and we can discuss how I can help you with that. But that is something that I help people with. And so when you learn how to stop those ego tricks from coming to play and lead with intuition and, co-create with your spirit, universe, God, whatever you believe in, and co-create that way, well, you can't lose for one. For two, quitting is a lot harder when you know that it's something that you're meant to do because now you see the loops of what happens when you quit. You can already play that tape forward. You could tell yourself, yeah, I could try to quit today, but in 6 months from now, I'm just going to be right back here. So I might as well keep going, right? You have this newfound knowledge that you didn't have the first time around. And that alone rebuilds self trust. When you know that you can't quit something because of what the outcome is going to be, your only option is to learn to trust yourself with the sustainability. You don't have another choice because your other choice is going to lead you right back into the misery that you tried to escape the first time. And so, in not having that other choice, you just come back to you just stick it out. That's all there is. You just stick it out. Okay. So, how can you rebuild self trust after, as you come back after things like that? So the first thing is make small promises that you can keep to yourself. If you have if you have an old habit, and this was my issue, you have an old habit of strategy hopping and jumping here and jumping there and stuff like that, make a small promise that you are going to try something and stick with it for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to collect some data this time. My first go round, I never collected data. I'll be honest. I didn't collect hardly any data. I didn't even know what that meant. Okay. I did not collect data. I just would kind of throw spaghetti at the wall and hope for the best. I was consistent, but then I didn't go back and analyze what's working. And so that is a change that I have this time, right? My small promise to myself is that at the very least, once a month, I'm going to look over all my analytics. I like to do it once a week, but in the beginning, I was like, okay, every 30 days, look over your analytics. Right. So, what's a small promise you can keep to yourself? Is it that you're going to make a piece of content every single day? Is it that you're going to reach out to 10 people every single day? Is it that you are going to, talk about your offer like what's the micro commitment you can make to yourself. So when you can make a micro commitment to yourself in business, you're going to reinforce the belief to your ego that you are actually serious about it this time. And the ego's job is going to be to help push that belief through, right? Until it freaks out, but cross that bridge later. Okay? Um Letting your body regulate before making decisions. So making sure that the choices and the decisions that you make are from your intuition and not your ego, that they don't feel jumpy, that everything, that it feels intuitively led, intuitively guided. It feels like the proper next step. Okay. This is something I had to learn when it came to investments. Because before I would just invest because somebody threw a price tag on something and I was like, I want to make that money and I would do it. Now, when I make investments, I'm like, does this actually align with the way that I want to run my business? There are so many ways to run a business. And that's the beauty about relaunching is you get to you realize what ways you didn't want to run it the last time and you can run it the way you want this time. It's a perk, I'm telling you. But think about it that way. Regulate your body before you make a decision. Ask yourself, as a shiny object? Am I strategy hopping? Or is this something that I want to do long term? And you might not get it right every single time. And if you don't get it right, you, you can't shame yourself for it. That is where we disconnect and start to our self trust starts to get all wonky, is because then we shame ourselves for it instead of looking at it and be like, okay, I did it again. What led me to doing that again? And then the next time. Life and identity work and all of that is really all about analyzing. When I started to look at everything as data, things started to get a little bit smoother here. Okay. Um, your creative trust and your identity trust. So showing up as a version of you who is not afraid of her past and choosing ideas because they are aligned with where you're going. So if you are so stuck on what didn't work before, you're going to repeat the pattern. But if you recognize what didn't work before and embody the identity of where you're going, not where you've been, you're not going to repeat the pattern because you're going to choose new patterns because now you have an identity trust and a creative trust within. So you're going to keep up the patterns that take you to where you're going. Every decision that you make, you'll say, okay, is this aligned with the seven-figure entrepreneur vision that I have, or six-figure, whatever the vision is, right? The next vision. Is this aligned with that vision, or am I operating out of old business trauma? Because sometimes there's investments that you need to make, and old business trauma will creep in, and you'll be like, I don't think I can do that. Like, I'm so nervous, I don't want to. But then that doesn't help you or anybody, right? So you have to identity shift and trust yourself to embody that next level identity. Okay. And so I'm going to give you some reflection prompts. If you know anything about me, then you know that we do right over here. And so some reflection prompts for my listeners who want to take a moment and, do a little intuitive writing. If you've never heard of intuitive writing, I'll break it down in a second, but who want to do a little bit of intuitive writing and really see what is going on beneath the surface to be able to move forward and change these beliefs, I'm going to give you a couple prompts. So the first thing is, where did I confuse my worth with my work? I would do that in the beginning. I would do that a lot. And you know what? My issue, one of them, was that I was just in front of the wrong audience. But I would do that a lot. I would confuse my worth with my work, and I would think that my work was bad because it wasn't converting the way that I wanted to. And what I had to learn was I was not in front of the right people. I was not in front of the right audience. And I learned this when I had a masterclass and I actually borrowed somebody else's audience to promote it. They were the right audience. And that is when the click started coming in. Whereas my audience at the time was crickets, right? That's when I learned that. So ask yourself that, where did I confuse my worth with my work? What part of me did I abandon the first time? Yeah, I abandoned my entire intuition. I was just doing everything, everything that I thought would work. Okay. What part of me did I abandon the first time? What truth did I ignore that I won't ignore again? That's a good one. And then who am I now without that old story? What does your entrepreneurial journey look like now? Where is it going? Where do you want it to go? Right? These are the things to ask yourself. So, like I said, I would break down intuitive writing. So, intuitive writing is a form of writing. I like to write for at least 10 minutes. I recommend that you write for at least 10 minutes, but you're going to grab a piece of paper. You're going to find yourself in a space where you're not going to be interrupted for at least 10 minutes and pick one of the questions that I just put. Write that on the top of your page. You can set a timer for 10 minutes. If you're nervous about not writing the full 10 minutes, you can set a timer for 10 minutes. And if you want to turn on meditative music, you can, or you can sit in silence and you write. All you do is you start to write, you start the thing by answering the questions. Oh my goodness. You start the prompt or the writing by answering the question. As you write, you don't worry about structure, you don't worry about grammar, you don't worry about any of those things. You just write for the full 10 minutes and you will see what is coming up. So, for example, where did I confuse my worth with my work? There's at least one time that you could think of where you did that. But what's going to happen in your intuitive writing is as you continue to write about it, you're going to notice more times come up and you probably have forgotten about, and you're going to really see what's going on. Once you see what's going on, you can remove, rewrite, redo the beliefs that are not going to go with you to this next level. And that is how you're going to trust yourself again in business. Okay. So, with that being said, if this helped you, if this struck something in you, if you're like, I needed this, definitely leave me a comment or write me a message. Tell me what stood out to you. Tell me what it is that, you enjoyed. Tell me a little bit, if you feel comfortable, tell me a little bit about your business journey. I am so open to sharing mine. I have definitely, like I said, I have been before in the start stop cycle, and mine was not without cause, and yours isn't either because it's what put me here today. But send me a message about that. If you have an entrepreneurial friend who needs to hear this, definitely send this to them. You can also send them my Substack. I do write on topics like this: self-trust, intuition, identity, business energetics. All that good stuff is over on my Substack for my subscribers. So definitely subscribe over there. And then, yeah, send me a message on this if you are interested in doing any type of work together to where I can guide you to come out and release some of these old business traumas and stuff. Also, send me a DM on Substack at Nikki Lynn Mayo, NikkILynnMayo. Send me a DM about that and we could talk about some of the ways that we could work together. But at the very least, I will see you guys in the next live. And yeah, be sure to subscribe for more like this. Bye.